to see what is right for you. This webinar is being recorded and it will be made publicly accessible on our YouTube channels. Some housekeeping rules for anybody that's new to the webinar. Everyone will be muted while the presentation is going on. There'll be a short presentation followed by discussion, and then everybody's invited to ask questions or share their views and opinions. Please feel free to activate your camera at this point. If you want to participate in conversation, you can either speak in the chat box or wave your hand. And then please hold the space key to unmute yourself when you're called upon. We'll monitor the chat box for any questions, comments, or if you're having technical issues. And there will be 2 polls appearing on your screen, one at the beginning, middle, and end, actually, so 3 polls. And you can change your name as well as keep your video off if you prefer. And this webinar, like I said, will be recorded for future views on YouTube. New to the last couple of webinars is a webinar evaluation they were doing. This evaluation is to ensure we are providing an effective tool that helps create a sense of community, change perceptions on disability, and improve social connectedness. You will have an opportunity to participate in the survey at the end of the webinar. We'll be posting in the chat box. If you participate in this survey, you will be entered to draw for a tablet. So, and if you attend more than one of these webinars through the next few months, every time you do one, you'll be posted again into the draw, so you'll get more opportunity. Like I said, the survey link will be shared in the chat box in the last 5 minutes or so of this webinar, and will also be in the description of the video on our YouTube channel. So just quickly now, we'll have a quick poll. There's 2 questions, 30 seconds per question. So if you can take a chance to answer them, please. Okay, everybody's answered. So I'll introduce our professional guest. Is David Legg. He is a professor at the Department of Health and Physical Education at the Mount Royal University. And he is also the chairperson of the Calgary Adaptive Hub that's powered by Jumpstart. He's going to give us opinion and some advice on looking at using your rec center as a fitness space. So there you go, David.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Thanks, first of all, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I recognized a couple names. Laura Shannon, I see you're online today. So you may be able to chime in as well and help with some of the conversations about Mount Royal University's programs and accessibility and our issues therein. So Terry asked me to talk about 2 things today. So one is the perspective that I have as a faculty member at Mount Royal University, and I teach adapted physical activity, so sport and recreation, fitness, physical activity, physical education for people with disabilities. And so the students that I get are either from the Department of Education, so they want to become teachers and they want to be able to know how to offer inclusive physical education, or they're in the Department of Health and Physical Education and they want to become sport and recreation managers. They want to run outdoor leadership programs. They want to become physical therapists, occupational therapists, or other affiliated designations kind of within the health system. And so this is the one course that they take. It's a half-year course, 3 credits, where they learn about, again, adapting sport and physical activity and recreation for persons with a disability. And as far as disability goes, it's broad in spectrum. So it's not just people with spinal cord injuries, obviously. It's not just people with mobility or physical disabilities that would cross the spectrum. But today, what I'm going to focus on is mobility disability, and in particular, spinal cord injury. Now, a little bit about my background. So thank you, Terry. You can go to the next slide if you want. So I am going to spend time talking about, again, Mount Royal University, but I just want to give you a little bit of background as to kind of who I am, and perhaps why I was asked to participate in this. So my dad had a disability, and I took a physical education degree at McMaster University, which is in Hamilton. And in that program, I took an adapted physical activity course. And so recognized that my interest both in sport and my awareness and understanding of disability could be merged or could be married. But I think it's important to recognize that I don't have a disability myself. So I'm speaking to this from an ableist perspective, an able-bodied person's perspective, and that has its limitations. So I certainly acknowledge that. After I finished my master's degree in sport management, where I decided to look at why people volunteer in sport for people with disabilities versus able-bodied sport, my first job was with the Ontario Wheelchair Sport Association in Toronto. And alongside of that was an early interest in wheelchair rugby, although I think at that time it was still referred to as murder ball, certainly in the context that I operated in. So that would have been in Windsor. And I showed up, to a club in Windsor and offered my volunteer services. And I was basically told to referee. I'd never seen the sport before. I didn't know anything about it. And they essentially, the people that were playing just told me I just needed to get the ball when it went out of bounds and bring it back and hand it to them. So that's how I learned about the sport of wheelchair rugby, and I became a referee. And I actually officiated at the very first international tournament that was held in Toronto. I think it was in 1992 or 93. So it was Canada, the US, and the UK. A guy by the name of Paul Spiranowski hosted that. So very first international wheelchair rugby tournament, I had a chance to officiate. And I don't even think there was a rule book at that time. I think it was like a 1 page of guidelines as to how that worked. After my job at Ontario Wheelchair Sport, moved to Ottawa, worked with Canadian Wheelchair Sport, and then moved west and did a PhD at the University of Alberta with Dr. Robert Stedward, who was the founding president of the International Paralympic Committee. And I did my practicum at the Rick Hansen Center, which is now called the Stedward Center. And actually some of the research that we did while I was there was the earliest work on autonomic dysreflexia, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And so we actually did some of the pioneering work on the doping, the performance enhancement of autonomic dysreflexia as it related to track wheelchair racing. Anyways, I digress. So what we're going to talk about today is looking for a fitness center and the kind of things that you would look for if you decided to go that road as far as being physically active. And let's presume that COVID's eventually going to end and we'll eventually be able to actually go to outside facilities other than in our own home. In my class, I use what's called the AIM-free. This is an American-based system. So again, subtle differences between the United States and Canada, particularly as it relates to the Americans with a Disability Act. But the accessibility system that they use, I like. There are others, just in Calgary, a guy by the name of Sean Crump, who runs a program called Universal Access, and a woman by the name of Darby Young, for instance, who has another organization. They have their own accessibility audits that tend to be broader in definition, but I like this AIM-free, and it really divides a fitness facility into 6 parts. And I'm going to go through each of those 6 parts and talk about where Mount Royal might grade or rate, and then the kind of things that you need to ask perhaps as you're looking to other facilities. And this, I would argue, is across the board. So it's not just major urban centers. It could be any place that you're looking to join a fitness club or a fitness center. So number 1 is policies. So what are the costs? Is there something that's more affordable if you have a specific disability? Is there a cost if you bring an attendant? And so do they have to pay a drop-in fee as well? Those are things to ask. Those are things to question about before you get there. Another policy that leads into the second category is as it relates to professional behavior. Is there a policy that talks about accreditation or the training of the staff that work at your facility that you're potentially going to go to? Do they have to be trained in working with people with disabilities? So for instance, the fitness program at Mount Royal that's in our credit or our non-credit program, so it's a continuing education program, we implemented an adapted class within their personal fitness trainer certificate program a couple of years ago, but not every program does that. In our program at Mount Royal, it's a required course to take the 3-credit course in adaptive physical activity. The University of Alberta does that. The University of Calgary does that as well. But not every university, not every college does that. So the training that your fitness providers have may have completely skirted over adapting for people with disabilities and specifically people with spinal cord injury. So I think that's a question worth asking. And, you know, is that a hiring policy? Is that a priority that's given to people that are hired? Once people are hired, is there a policy that talks about training? And then that leads to then the professional behavior. Are the staff welcoming for people with disabilities? And I have to admit, when I teach my adaptive physical activity class, that is perhaps the one goal that I have that overrides all other, is that once they've graduated and they're working, if a person with a disability shows up, regardless of what the disability is and whether they even know what the disability is, at least are they welcoming and willing to adapt and willing to be creative to enable that person to participate to the best that they're able to. The third area is swimming pools. Now, of course, not every facility is going to have that, but some of the larger ones that you may participate in, particularly in the larger urban centers, may, and that might be something worth considering, even the temperature of the pool, right? So the pool at Mount Royal, for instance, is quite cold because it's a competitive pool. May not be applicable for more leisurely types of swims. So the temperature of the pool. Do they teach lessons specific for people with disabilities? The example that we have there, H2Able, was created by a colleague of mine at Mount Royal who was the aquatics manager. We ran another program called CAPA, Children's Adapted Physical Activity, and you can see the picture on the bottom right-hand corner there where you see a number of children sitting on a gym floor. That's where we partner up students with children with disabilities, again, across a wide spectrum. And from that, we would spend an hour in the pool, and our aquatics manager was getting asked by the parents of the children who were in our CAPA program, hey, do you have swimming lessons for children with disabilities? And he's like, we don't, but I'm going to create them. So he just made it up. And it's been quite successful and has been running ever since. So I think, again, that's a question worth asking is, do you have specific programs for people with disabilities? And an example could be within the pool context. Just some of the other pictures that were there, and we'll get to this in a minute. So we have the wheelchair basketball program, and that's the one that Lorna is most familiar with, who's online with us today. And there's another image of our fitness center there. Again, it's not 100% accessible, you know, so an example would be the raised Olympic lifting station. But we're working towards it, and I'll speak to maybe some examples of that on our next slide. So Terry, next slide, please. So again, the other three elements, when we come back to that aim-free, are the built environment, information, and equipment. So the built environment, actually, you can see a picture of Lorna right there when we had Kent Hare and another gentleman come by to test out our functional electrical stimulation bike in our fitness center. Not an inexpensive piece of equipment, I may add. But our built environment, things like parking, access from the parking to the facility itself, the bathrooms. And again, you've probably had many experiences where people say that they're accessible, but are they truly? So again, those are questions worth asking, and also perhaps even testing before assuming that they are in fact accessible to the same standards that you expect them to. The entranceway and the exitway, that's something that Mount Royal has not done, I would say, particularly well. We have one of those turnstiles to get out of our facility, so people that use wheelchairs have to go out a different exit. For the longest time, the door didn't even have a push button, so they had to kind of ram into the door to try and knock it open. Those are, you know, perhaps small examples, but also perhaps really significant examples of where inaccessibility then deters people from participating. Another example that I put down there that I realize is not relevant for most, if not all of you, is our residences at Mount Royal University. So we talk about wanting to be an inclusive and accessible campus for students with disabilities. And I only realized this when we were going to host, in the images on the bottom of the screen there, a wheelchair rugby national championships. We have hosted wheelchair rugby tournaments at Mount Royal before, but we were going to host the national championships and obviously have teams travel from around the world and stay at Mount Royal in their residences. But what I didn't realize was that the doors to the washrooms in the residences were smaller than the doors to get into the rooms in the residence. And that's just, it didn't occur to me to even check that. I just presumed that they would be the same width, but that was not the case. And so again, we had to then cancel the teams staying in our residences and had to book hotel rooms up at, you know, that motel, the motel strip up by the University of Calgary. So not a great reality, both for the athletes that were coming in, certainly from us as an organizing committee perspective. Information, the signage. Like when I talk about this from a multi-disability or a universal design perspective, the use of images as opposed to wording, for instance, for new Canadians. But the one that I think is perhaps worth noting and recognizing as people who use wheelchairs is the marketing. Are there images of people with disabilities exercising at that facility? And if not, it might be an easy recommendation and an easy fix. Now, that's something that I've been encouraging and trying to get Mount Royal to do for years. And we're having slow success. But I just think that that's a fairly straightforward and easy win as far as showing to the public, hey, we are open for business for people with disabilities, and here are images of people doing exactly that. And part of the argument that I make when I talk about this to my students is that handy-capitalism one, whereby it's an economic benefit. 10 to 15% of the population has a disability in Canada. Why wouldn't you want those individuals who are paying to come to your facility and continue using it, particularly in a time of COVID where this, return to play, return to quote unquote normalcy will be challenging for many. I think you want to make sure that you're open for business for as many people as possible. Then the last element is the equipment. And so again, we were fortunate to have a functional electrical stimulation bike because of research that was taking place. So I was able to access funds through a foundation in the US to purchase the bike, because the bike itself was, I think, $35,000. So it's not an inexpensive piece of equipment. But are there pieces of equipment there that are accessible? And they don't always have to be super expensive. So as an example, we have a raised stretching mat up on our second floor that allows a person from wheelchair to transfer onto the stretching mat and get back into the chair without having to go all the way down to the ground. It was really cost effective. It was really quite inexpensive just to build the platform to put the mat on. Another example, we have the benefit of having a partnership with the local wheelchair basketball clubs in Calgary, where they store their sport chairs on our campus that we're able to access. Again, I recognize and I'm cognizant that that's not always common, but there are funds too for places to purchase sport chairs. So if the facility you go to has basketball, maybe they could have a wheelchair basketball program. I think it's worth asking, and perhaps you may have to help them understand where these avenues are for funding, but I think that's worth pursuing. Next slide, please, Terry. So now I just want to quickly talk about a new initiative called the Calgary Adapted Hub. Next slide, please. And then you can click through all five there. Thanks, Terry. So the Calgary Adapted Hub was something that was initiated 2 or 3 years ago and is sponsored and funded by Jumpstart, so Canadian Tire's national charity. And the proposal was for 7 organizations, so the 5 that you see listed there, in addition to Sport Calgary and the City of Calgary Recreation. And it was to start thinking about this idea of having a hub of shared information, of shared partnerships, in addition to shared knowledge, marketing, and just a place that somebody could phone and say, hey, I'm interested in participating in sport and recreation. Where can I go? And so Karen Dunnett, who's on the call with us today, is our new program manager. She was just hired on October 1st. So this is a relatively new organization. We don't have an online presence yet. We're working on that to find out more information about us. But these are the 5 program partners. And so I spoke already about the Children's Adapted Physical Activity Program, but the University of Calgary, for instance, offered their very first adapted sports camp last summer, 2 summers ago, and we'll be operating, fingers crossed, this coming summer. Repsol Sports Center, which is the old Talisman Center, which is the old Lindsay Park Center in downtown Calgary, now has an inclusive model for all their sport clubs. WinSport, Canada Olympic Park, has a new adapted multi-sport program, and Vivo, which is a large sport and recreation center in north central Calgary, is also offering a physical literacy program for people with disabilities. And again, we're, obviously because of COVID, we're delayed in starting the operations of this, but this is certainly our hope and our goal moving forward. Next slide, please, Terry. These are just some images of examples of types of programs. So you can actually see Terry in the center there with that bright orange hoodie and the fancy hair. And then you can see myself actually trying to learn how to play wheelchair tennis, much harder than I originally thought it was going to be. And then some of the adapted fitness programs and some of the specifics that we have in order to have the facilities be more accessible for people with disabilities. Next slide, please, Terry. So this is the contact information. I mentioned Karen already. Another aspect of this program that I think is worth sharing is that we've made a commitment to evidence-based programming. So all the programs, so we've hired also a part-time knowledge and research translation coordinator, Eliza Sandrin, who is actually the woman who, through her master's thesis, created the Adapted Camp program at the University of Calgary, and she's a former national rugby player herself and has created a rugby program for children with autism, which is kind of an interesting story that we can get into at another time. Anyways, there's the contact information. Again, we're relatively new, but we're hoping once the vaccines come and everyone's ready to play again, that we're ready to go and start running programs. So Terry, I'll stop there. I know I'm a little over time already, and I apologize for that. I've been told that I like nothing more than hearing myself talk. So it's always an issue when you ask me to speak to things like this. So thank you again for allowing me to participate, and I'll turn it back to you.
No problem, David. Thank you so much. So just quickly, I think you can hear me. We're doing another 30-second poll, 30 seconds per question. I think everybody might have finished that. So I'll move on to the next slide. So thank you again, David, for your presentation. So our first person with lived experience is Carissa Irving. She's a peer presenter. She's going to talk to you about how and why she created a home gym. She created a pretty cool little setup at her home. So I'll put it right to you, Carissa.
Awesome. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for inviting me. I am Carissa. I have a complete C6, C7 spinal cord injury that I sustained 11 years ago when I was 16 and involved in a motor vehicle accident as a passenger. And yeah, if you want to go to the first slide, I spent several years throughout my injury going to a couple neuro facilities, and I gained a lot of knowledge on workouts and equipment that worked for me. And I realized that I wanted to take some money and just invest in my own space that I could use at my leisure and in the comfort of my home. And I knew in the long run it would save money and definitely save time, as I would no longer need to rely on access bus to schedule transportation and schedule appointments for workouts, and also not needing to worry about the elements and the winter outside, and as well as dealing with COVID at this time. So once I was familiar with my needs and equipment that I wanted, I started to search online. And you don't have to get larger pieces of equipment brand new. Definitely start with Kijiji and eBay for these types of things. And since these are not super common items, it can take a bit of searching. So when I first started searching, it didn't come up right away. It was a few weeks of looking around, and this standing frame in the picture was on eBay used, and it just had a few scratches, but otherwise it's great. And it is from the US, so there was a conversion rate and some shipping, but even with that, it was a lot cheaper than getting brand new. And next slide. And here is my gym setup in my front attached garage. So the other large piece of equipment was the new step machine I got on Kijiji, and I started the search in Calgary and then expanded for Alberta, and nothing was really coming up. So I looked for all of Canada and found it in Ontario. So then I also had to find a moving company that would pick it up and bring it to my home. And yeah, then the squat rack I did get new at Fitness Depot, the mirror just from IKEA, and then all these smaller equipment pieces were just from Amazon. So the resistant bands, some weighted balls, boxing gloves, and a foam roller. And next slide. So the types of exercises I do there, I have doing the standing frame at least 3 times a week, I find is very beneficial. And the new step, 1 to 2 times a week, it's great for some cardio during the winter months when you can't go outside and wheel to get some cardio. And then lots of work with the resistant bands for shoulders, triceps, and biceps. And I do have a trainer that will come over 2 to 3 times a week, depending, and he will create workouts for me and obviously help me strap into the resistant bands and stuff because I do have limited hand function. So that's been really great. And yeah, that's kind of my whole setup, and it's been awesome.
Thank you so much, Carissa. Truly jealous of your setup, and maybe I can talk my kids into setting me up like that for you. They'll be my trainers. So my next peer presenter is Brandice Lorch. She went a little bit different direction. She decided she wanted to join a boxing gym. So she has a pretty unique perspective on that. So I'll just let her right to her.
Like Terry said, I'm Brandice Lorch. I have a C34, C67 in complete injury, so I'm a full-time wheelchair user. Just like Carissa had done, I went to other neurological fitness centers, and although I did gain a lot in core strength, I wasn't really getting the exercise and the cardio and all of that I wanted. So go to the next slide, Terry. So I had a goal that I really wanted to start boxing and go to a boxing class. So first I needed to know my goal, and that was my goal. I wanted to do something with cardio. I wanted to do more with, to get more upper body strength. So I knew my goal, but then it was about finding somewhere that I could go that would be inclusive to someone with a wheelchair joining. So I did my research. I found various gyms in the city. I did contact them before actually going in, just to say that, I'm in a wheelchair, I'm completely independent. Would you be open to the idea of me coming and joining your classes? Unfortunately, I did get a negative answer from 2 gyms, but in the end, I did find one that was able to accommodate me. Now, the other thing is too, is people that live in small towns, they may not have the accessible fitness centers. They might not have, say, a boxing gym or even a fitness center that someone can get into, but what they may have that you can look into is they may have small rec centers or small sports clubs for people that maybe play hockey or basketball that you might be able to go to that will have equipment that'll be adaptable for you, whether it's, bands or balls or free weights or whatnot. So it is something that you can also find in a small town if you're looking for it. So, the biggest thing, right, is how to communicate with the gym before you go there to make sure that your needs are going to be met, that you're going to be comfortable going there. So like David was talking about, he has the AIM-free that he works with. And so before people even go to his public gyms, they know it's going to be accessible in all the different ways because AIM-free does that. But when you're looking for a public gym to go into, you have to be your own AIM-free. So you have to ask them about parking and the washrooms, make sure the entrance is a flat threshold and that they have some equipment that you're going to be able to use, as well as what does the cost look like, and is that going to be okay for you? So, and then, I got a feeling when I talked to the gym owner that it was going to be an inclusive situation when I went there, whether or not they had dealt with people with disabilities or not, and they hadn't. So, but I did feel comfortable going in there, and also knowing that there was the willingness of the trainers to work with me at the gym. Now, no accessible equipment, no problem. So when I went to a public gym, they don't have the equipment that you can roll under, you know, to do pull downs, to do chest presses. Sometimes there's accessible equipment like that didn't exist at that public gym. But there are other things that are always at public gyms, like resistant bands and free weights. And for me, I was in a boxing class, and in that boxing class, there was also a portion of it where people were working on just core strength and floor work. And I was lucky enough that the trainers there were really open-minded, that they were able to take, obviously I could only work on stuff from my upper body, but they were able to take the equipment that they had and modify some of the exercises for me. They were really open that way. They would even go and do some research before I went in there to find different exercises that would be good for people in wheelchairs. So I was really lucky that way. I also approached the owner and said, hey, if I bring my own stationary arm bike here, just a simple, cheap one, would you let me put it somewhere? And then he said, yes. I didn't end up doing that, but I thought that was going to be my way of maximizing my time going in there. So next slide. So lesson learned, listen to your body. Now, with the AIM Free program, David is able to make sure that the people that are going to be working with the individuals with disabilities have specific training and knowledge as far as neurological conditions and body mechanics and injuries. Well, unfortunately, when you go into a public gym, the trainers may not have that knowledge. So, you know, I was all gung-ho after COVID happened. I wanted to go in, I wanted to work out as hard as I could. So they were giving me exercises to do so. And unfortunately, I wasn't listening to my body, and I ended up wrecking my shoulder, which was a previous injury. So, and when I went there, you know, people were really excited to see someone that was in a wheelchair there. They had probably never seen it before. And because of that, I wanted to show that there was no limitations and to do any exercise that they gave me. But it's okay to say you can't do an exercise to a trainer that doesn't know much about disabilities. Just because you say no doesn't mean that you can't, doesn't mean that you're going to look more weak. But so you have to self-advocate for yourself. I wish that I would have let them know that my shoulder has to stay in alignment, that it doesn't have much range. And in that case, I probably would have protected it and probably still would have been going there right now. But unfortunately, I've had to quit boxing for a little bit. I just want to say, as a last thing, by going to a public gym, you're actually being a really big advocate for persons with disabilities. Like I say, they maybe haven't seen someone in a wheelchair in a public gym, so you're a complete rock star going there. So yeah, being an advocate for that as well is awesome. So that's all I have. Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brandice. I really love, like I went to a gym once and definitely felt the eyes of everybody. So it's really brave and cool that you were doing that. So just quickly, because we're a little over time, like I said, there's a webinar evaluation. So in the last 5 minutes, the link will be posted in the chat box, and I'll just remind everybody with 5 minutes to go that it's there. So it'd really be appreciated for you to get on and do that. And as well as, since we're over time, you may not get your questions or thoughts heard. So Spinal Cord Injury Alberta is hosting a webinar peer chat. It'll be next week, same time, 12 to 1. And there's a Zoom ID and password below. If you do not get it, like I said, it will be on our YouTube channel, so you can quickly look at it later. And we may post it in our social medias so that you can find it. So our social media platforms, as you can see, you have us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, as well as on YouTube. You can find all of our videos as well as other videos on home modifications and different things in our spinal community. So at this moment, I'd really like to open it up to anybody for questions or discussions, or even just talking about what you do to be fit. So I'll stop sharing the screen. And look around and see if there's I haven't seen the chat box. If some of my other facilitators can tell me if anybody has a question or.
Hi, Terry, it's Guy. Got a question for David. Is there plans to extend that hub to other locations like Edmonton to share that similar information as Calgary's doing?
We've already been in touch with the Stedford Center at the University of Alberta. So the answer is no. This is not going to become a franchise. Well, I shouldn't say that. I guess anything's possible. But no, we're not looking to come into Edmonton, although we are looking to partner with the Stedford Center and to perhaps share kind of the things that we've learned in our experience that maybe Edmonton can learn from as well. We have connections with people in Medicine Hat that we've already made Canmore. But again, we're not, the last thing I want to do is give the impression that we're looking to take over the world. We're just trying to figure out Calgary right now. And then hopefully then we can share our learnings in our own context, and if people can benefit from that, great. I will say too that, we're partnering with a facility in Oshawa called the Ability Center. And they helped us through quite a significant kind of strategic planning process last January. And there are already other groups that are looking at doing something similar. There was a group in Victoria that reached out to us, another group in Montreal that reached out to us too, to kind of think of this model of having a hub within the city.
And just having worked with SCI Alberta for a number of years and getting questions about fitness and knowing that there's a number of different disability organizations doing adapted sports like Paralympic Sports Association, and you got Canadian Wheelchair Sports, and you got a vast number of groups and organizations, and where you can get equipment and what funding programs are available. It'd be nice to have a hub that included kind of all that. So a person that's newly injured can go, okay, I can go to this hub and now I'll go into whichever spoke of that hub and get directed.
And Guy, that's exactly what our hope is what happens with our mandate. We're not looking to take over existing programs in a Calgary context, because there's some exceptional, extraordinary programs that are being run. But I would argue that they're kind of, they're operating in silos. And I think to your point, people just don't even know sometimes that they even exist. So what we're hoping is that if somebody is newly injured, if there's a parent of a child who has a disability and they want their child to get active, they would have a place to call. And we would then be able to say, hey, this is where you live. This is the sport you're interested in. And I know there are apps that have tried to do that too, but I guess I come back to, I still think sometimes that personal connection and that personal conversation is as valuable, if not more valuable.
I do have a question from Jason. He was curious to hear about any needs. I'm thinking like something you didn't realize you wanted or needed to have that you discovered, but you did not expect when you're either setting up your gym or you're finding your gym, something that you didn't even think about that you had to deal with. Either of you can.
Okay, I'll go. I think that the types of things I didn't think about was, I had purchased, I had it on contract, I had purchased a membership, but what I didn't realize is how difficult it was going to be in the winter to get there and to have to call ahead to make sure that they had shoveled everything. I wasn't really expecting that. I had started in the summer, so it was really easy to get in there. What else didn't I expect? It was a really, really positive experience. So that's a really hard question to answer without trying to be nitpicky and poking at something. I think just, going in with confidence and just flying by the seat of your pants is just the best thing you can just do. And any obstacle, just let it slide over your shoulder, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen anywhere in any situation. I hope I can't I hope that may have answered your question a little bit, but if you have a specific question, then I may be able to give you more details.
Carissa, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say for me, I really wanted the whole home gym setup and wasn't sure exactly how that would look with being a quad with limited hand function and needing assistance with getting set up for a workout. So getting equipment and stuff was one thing, but then being able to find somebody to come and assist me and help plan workouts and stuff. And I ended up being able to find somebody that I had previously worked with at a facility, and then he lives very close by. So it's worked out really well for me in that sense. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, thanks. I do have, I have another question from Beto. He was wondering, and this is for all three of you, just your opinion, what do you think would be more valuable? So to have a center that's very specific for people in wheelchairs where they can go exercise with specialized trainers, or just have broad spectrum, all facilities are wheelchair accessible, accommodate with, and they have some special knowledge for people with disabilities, but it's more just a, open gym setup.
I would,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Carissa.
I would almost say like a open gym setup with people who can specialize with wheelchairs, because then you can have the option of going with like friends or family and working out all together instead of just having it specialized.
I think that, in my opinion, is, we would all love for every public place out there to be accessible for us and to be perfect for us that way. But unfortunately, it isn't going to be. And I don't know if you'd be able to find, if a gym would be able to find a reason to have a trainer there for people with disabilities when they may not have someone with a disability in. I think it would be great if that could be advocated for, that at least one member at a fitness gym knows something about disabilities. Other than that, you just have to be, for me, I knew that I was going to have to be independent going in and not rely on other people. And if that meant grabbing my own equipment and maybe making my own exercises, I knew that I had to do that. But in answer to your question, it would be awesome if there was a requirement for at least one staff member to have some sort of training in all gyms. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Chris and Brandice. I guess my response to that would be is more from a practical perspective and an immediate one. I think the most important part is that you have people at these centers that are welcoming and that are willing to learn and are creative and are willing to try. And then, I think, Brandice, with your example, right? I mean, it's unlikely that there's going to be a ton of people that have a background in boxing for people with spinal cord injuries. I have to admit that when I met you, you were the first person I'd known that had an interest in doing that. So, but I think, to me anyways, it's that ability to adapt. It's that ability to be creative. I often think the adaptive physical activity class should be the capstone course for our undergraduate students, because it pushes them to think outside of, the usual of what they already know. So to me, that's the biggest hurdle, is if people are welcoming and willing to meet with you and to kind of learn from you and to find out what you're interested in and then figure it out. I think a lot of it can happen relatively inexpensively with existing equipment and slight, if subtle, adaptations. Now, again, maybe I'm naive and I don't have the lived experience. So perhaps I'm pardon the pun, blind to that experience, but that would be my sense.
Honestly, you're not blind to that experience. You're absolutely correct, David. I went in, and when I met with the trainers, they automatically took an interest in making some things adaptable to me. And I was so impressed that before I would come in, they would have looked at things that people in wheelchairs would have done, or even set up my equipment ahead of time for me. I wasn't even expecting that. But yeah, it was just that willingness to learn that I felt was really, really special and made it a really comfortable experience for me.
I have a couple comments too. So Brandice mentioned that, you know, you're gonna come across difficulties and let them slide off your back. And I just wanted to share a story of a client of mine who went to a gym, was very happy at the gym, loving it, but then had an unfortunate experience with parking. And he ended up confronting the guy who parked in the wrong place. And the owner of the gym didn't step up and calm that situation. So he ended up leaving the gym, feeling bad about it. So I think knowing, unfortunately, you are going to probably come across some things that either, you know, are caused by maybe some things that are just obstacles that are just there, or it might be people. And how are you going to deal with that? The other thing I wanted to say to Carissa's point about finding a trainer to work with, that's awesome. And I just wanted to remind people too that with using the FES bike, we train people to have friends or family come with them who can help them. And you have a lot of experience with what you want to do, know what you can do. And a trainer is a great idea to kind of get you on a program. But if you're knowledgeable and comfortable enough, just get a friend to work out. They can hook you up and they can do something else. They can do squats while you're doing, you know, your exercise, and then you can have a buddy workout too at no cost.
I was just going to say that your buddy will get in for free. So that makes it pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Steve, I'll let you go first.
Thank you. I have a question about COVID restrictions, and this could apply for all three of you. What kind of restrictions are there? Have you had any issues with it?
For the gym that I was going to, they did in the first round they did shut the entire gym down and then reopened it and had special cleaning techniques. This second time around, when they started making more restrictions, they could no longer hold classes because they couldn't do groups, and then people were only able to use equipment. And now it's closed again. I mean, they would just take your temperature in, and you had to fill out a form every time that you went in.
Carissa? Oh, you work at home. David? Sorry.
Yeah, so our experience is similar to Brandice, you know, with provincial guidelines being what they are. Yeah, I mean, we're not operating at certainly at the moment anyways, and then hopefully after Christmas we're able to come back and continue to operate fully, even with our children's adaptive physical activity programs, and where it becomes even increasingly more difficult within a disability context, perhaps compared to an able-bodied one, is the need for attendance, the need for one-on-one relationships, working with people. So it's an issue across the board, not just with spinal cord injury, but for people with disabilities, being able to access sport and recreation physical activity is an issue. And even more so, I would argue, in a winter context in Alberta, right, with the inability perhaps to go out and recreate and be physically active outside as much as they would, as people would in the summer anyways, that lack of access to indoor facilities is going to be a challenge.
So I have an equipment related question, and this will be kind of David and Carissa. So I think a lot of people, especially when they first get injured and they're getting out there, or they're deciding to do more at home, they're looking for wheelchair accessible equipment. I know I did early on. There's some super expensive random things that you'll find on some websites. I ended up buying an upper tone that some quadriplegic in California designed, and yes, I can use the whole thing myself, but it's not really, you know, full range kind of exercises. And so maybe, especially for David, like for Mount Royal, or Chris for your place, what kind of equipment did you would you want, or what kind of equipment do you suggest people look at? You know, like they obviously don't need a full range of equipment. There might be some piece of equipment that's very good at, you know, doing a bunch of things just with one piece of equipment, so they don't think they have to buy a bunch of different things.
I'll speak first, but I'll also provide the caveat that this is not necessarily my expertise. Lauren, I would always go to Lauren when she was at Mount Royal to ask her for advice on stuff like that. Like, we purchased big pieces of equipment that are expensive. Now, an FES bike is perhaps an anomaly there. I mean, again, not an inexpensive piece of equipment but you can use at home. And I know there are a number of people at SCI that do get them for home use. I think, you know, Terry, I don't know, those rubberized bands, like I think body weight exercises, I think even light weights, like I think there's a lot you can do with relatively simple stuff. I think the fitness industry, here's my criticism, is, you know, push the need to have really expensive, dramatic pieces of equipment. At the end of the day, you could probably, like I'll give my age. There was a guy by the name of Bo Jackson who was a really famous football player, going back to the 80s, and he also played baseball. And I remember reading a Sports Illustrated article about him, and all he did were push-ups, sit-ups, and sprints. That's all he did. He didn't lift any weights, and he was like, he looked like he was a weightlifter, but all he did was push-ups, sit-ups, and run. I don't think we need to make this more complicated than we seem to. I think, again, you know, stretching bands, light weights, whatever you've got in your house, milk jugs, I don't know. You can make do. It may not look fancy. It's, you know, it's like you don't have to have the Lululemon clothing. You can just wear a regular t-shirt. Like, you don't need to make it fancier than it is.
Yeah, I'd say resistance bands I've been using since day one. And like you've seen in the pictures, that I just have like the Velcro wrist things that they hook onto. And then even if I have some light free weights, there is something called active hands that are used to help you hold on to something. So that's an option if you have limited hand function. And then, yeah, and then just in my instance, having that squat rack allows for so many different ways to hook the bands up. But before I had that, I was just doing stuff in my entryway and using like the door stop attachments for resistance bands and doing pulls off my doorway. So there is definitely like easy ways to start out.
You know, I saw the note there about kettlebells. I mean, yeah, kettlebell's great. I love that new commercial, by the way, the grandfather who's using the kettlebell so that he can raise.
Yeah, I see that.
You can get a milk jug, and then you can fill it up as much as you want or as little as you want. You could use that as for the same process, for crying out loud. Like when I walk to No Frills grocery stores, I'm walking home and I got my 2 jugs of milk. I'm doing arm curls on the way home, you know, or whatever, or shrugs. I mean, like, it doesn't have to be fancy and expensive. I mean, you can make do with probably all kinds of stuff that's in your home.
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. I remember there's a Bowflex where the seat removed, but they stopped making it. So I was just kind of why I was asking you guys. So just quickly, there's 5 minutes left. So there might be time for one more question after, but I want to remind everybody that there's a link in the chat box that we'll be posting right away here. It's just been posted. So if you click on that link, you can fill out a survey, and you, like I said, will be in for a chance to win a tablet. I want to really thank everybody for coming on and listening to our unique perspective. And this will be posted on YouTube, so you can share it. And the link for the evaluation, again, will be in if you don't get a chance to get at it right here. I did like, there was one question about, do you guys know if there is, so they go to a gym and there was nobody trained to help them with their workout. But if, do you know if there's any trained freelance fitness people that can go around and join them at a fitness center to help make a program for them?
I can address that if you like. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that most facilities do have restrictions on who can train there because of liability, because of a lot of different things. However, if it's going to just set you up on a program, your first step would be to talk to their fitness department there and explain that to them. Say, you know, this is a trusted trainer, these are their qualifications. They might have to meet with that director to get the permission to do that. And I really don't know, but I would suspect that in most cases that's a high probability if it's a one-time deal. It would not be something that would be allowed time over time.
I worked with a private trainer, and we did go to the leisure center. And you're right, we had to just pretend that he was my friend coming with me. No discussion about anything else than that. Just he was my friend coming with me. And
yeah, if you're discreet and they're not walking around with a clipboard, you can kind of get away with that.
Exactly.
So yeah, thanks guys. So like I said, please look in the link in the chat box to do the evaluation. And if you have more questions, we'll be doing another webinar chat next week, hosted by Spinal Cord Injury Alberta, and we will just talk same topic. And I just want people to, you know, we jump on and we share what we do, and the beauty of this community, especially with adaptive fitness, like you heard today, is that everybody does it differently, and it's all about figuring it out and being adaptable. So hopefully that chat will be able to help answer a lot of questions, or you'll be able to help somebody else with something they didn't even know about. So yeah, I'll give you guys time now to find the link and go do the evaluation. And thank you again for joining us.
Harry, we'll just do the last couple of polls as well.
Oh, right, geez. Yes, do the polls right now. Thank you so much. Saving me, Jonah. Perfect. All right.
I know there was a lot of great discussion, so easy to get lost, but I'm also launching just the last poll as well.
Perfect. Well, I hope I will definitely be there next Monday. So I really hope to see some of you guys there. Join us for a discussion, and anybody that sees us on YouTube, can't wait for your perspective. Also, please comment on our video on YouTube. If you have any questions there, we do try to keep track of the comment section. So we can, if somebody needs help with something, hopefully we can answer your question there as well. So again, the link is in the chat box, and I'll talk to you all later.
Thank you.